The meeting room on Confederation Prime was silent. Ambassador Hyan stood at the center of a massive circular chamber, surrounded by representatives from 7 different alien species. Each one looked down at him from their elevated platforms. The architecture was designed to make visitors feel small. It worked on most species. Hyan didn't feel small. He felt patient. The Archon of the Thraxi Communion, an elderly being named Velnus, reviewed the data on his display. His 4 eyes moved across the screen with obvious distaste. Human history scrolled past in violent detail. Wars, weapons, destruction. Thousands of years of it. Your species has been fighting for its entire recorded history, Velnus said. His translator made his voice sound disappointed. 10,000 years of continuous warfare. Why? Hyan considered his answer carefully. Because Earth is not a kind world. Resources were limited. Territory was contested. We learned to fight or we died. But you developed civilization, another council member said. This one was a Veltronian, her crystalline body reflecting the chamber lights. You built cities, created art, wrote music. Yet you never stopped making better weapons. Why? Because the wars never stopped, Hyan replied simply. Velnus made a gesture that the translator interpreted as sadness. You poor creatures. To live in such fear. To spend millennia terrified of your own extinction. The Council grants you observer status. Come to the core systems. Learn from us. Learn what real peace looks like. Hyan bowed politely. He didn't mention that humanity had been at peace for 60 years now. He didn't mention that they had chosen peace, not stumbled into it. He simply accepted the Council's terms and returned to his quarters. Commander Minnow was waiting for him. The military advisor looked angry. They think we're cowards. Did you hear that? They think all our history means we're afraid. Let them think that, Hyan said. For now, far from Confederation Prime, in the outer regions of Council space, something was moving. Scout Jiwan detected it first. Her small research vessel was mapping gravitational anomalies near the frontier colonies when the readings went strange. Space was bending in ways that shouldn't be possible. She recorded everything and sent it to the Council Science Division. 3 weeks later, she was still waiting for a response. The Council had other problems. A Thraxi mining expedition had vanished near the Outer Veil region. 12 ships and 3,000 crew members, gone without a trace. The Council dispatched a diplomatic envoy. They brought gifts and translation matrices. They were prepared to negotiate with whatever new species they had encountered. The envoy never came back. When the second expedition vanished, the Council finally became worried. When an entire star system went dark, they became terrified. The emergency session was chaos. Representatives from 7 species all talked at once, their translators creating a wall of overlapping sound. Then the reports came in. A new species had emerged. They called themselves the Korthax Swarm. They were a hive mind, billions of individual bodies sharing one consciousness. And they were hungry. The first battle happened at Helion Prime. The Council sent their best fleet. 200 ships with the most advanced weapons in the galaxy. They were confident. The Council had maintained peace for 3,000 years. Surely this new species would see reason. The battle lasted 4 hours. When casualties reached 3,000, the Thraxi fleet commander did what any reasonable being would do. He surrendered. The Council had clear protocols for this. When one side demonstrated superiority, the other side yielded. Resources would be negotiated. Territory would be shared. Everyone would survive. The Korthax didn't know about protocols. They didn't accept the surrender. They kept firing until every Council ship was debris. Then they moved to the planet and began harvesting. 6 billion sentients died in the first week. The news hit the Council like a physical blow. Velnus stood before the assembled representatives, his 4 eyes dim with shock. They don't negotiate. They don't accept surrender. They simply consume. Over the next 2 months, 7 more systems fell. The Korthax moved through council space like a plague. Every fleet sent against them was destroyed. Every planet they reached was stripped bare. The swarm didn't talk. It didn't make demands. It just ate. Velnus sent emergency messages to all council members and protectorates. The message was simple: retreat to the core systems. Abandon the outer territories. Survival was more important than pride. The message reached Earth on a Tuesday morning. Ambassador Hyan read it 3 times, then called for an emergency meeting. Within 6 hours, the command room was filled with generals, admirals, and civilian leaders. They reviewed all the tactical data from the fallen systems. General Taijin studied the battle recordings with professional interest. They're fast. They're numerous. And they don't retreat, even when hurt. He looked around the table. The council species are running. What do we do? The room fell silent. Everyone looked at the star maps. The Korthax were advancing. At their current speed, they would reach human colonies within 6 months. Earth itself would be threatened within a year. Fleet Admiral Somin spoke first. We can run. The Council is offering sanctuary in the core systems. We could evacuate the outer colonies, pull everyone back, and abandon 10 million colonists? General Taijin asked. Just leave them? The Council did, someone pointed out. We're not the Council, Hyan said quietly. All eyes turned to him. That's the point, isn't it? We're not like them. They evolved on paradise worlds. Easy resources. Mild competition. They learned that surrender is survival. But Earth? He smiled, and it wasn't a kind smile. Earth taught us different lessons. So we fight, Minho said. It wasn't a question. We fight, Hyan agreed. Send a response to the Council. Thank them for their concern. Tell them we'll handle the situation ourselves. General Taijin leaned back in his chair. They think we're afraid of war. They actually believe that. They looked at our history and saw fear instead of skill, suffering instead of learning. Admiral Somin began making notes on her datapad. We need to activate Protocol Nightfall. Full mobilization. Convert civilian industry to military production. Recall all military personnel from leave. The outer colonies can't be held, an army colonel said. Not against those numbers. Then we don't hold them, Taijin replied. We make them cost everything. Every colony becomes a fortress. Every fortress becomes a grave for anyone trying to take it. The planning session lasted 14 hours. By the end, humanity had a strategy. It wasn't a strategy for victory. It was a strategy for making the Korthax bleed. Make them pay for every meter. Make them slow down. Make them learn that humans don't run. 3 days later, Velnus received Hyan's response. The message was brief and polite. It thanked the Council for their offer. It declined the sanctuary. It stated that humanity would defend its territory. Velnus read it twice, then called his military advisor. They're going to fight. These terrified creatures, so afraid of war that they spent 10 millennia preparing for it, they're actually going to fight. Should we send support? The advisor asked. Velnus looked at the casualty reports from Helion Prime. 3,000 dead in 4 hours. That was more than the Thraxi had lost in 300 years. No, let them learn. When they see what the Korthax can do, they'll retreat. Better they learn now than waste lives later. But Velnus didn't understand. The Council species had spent 3,000 years believing that peace was natural. That war was an aberration. That any species would choose survival over pride. Humanity had spent 10,000 years learning a different truth. War wasn't an aberration. It was normal. Peace was the aberration, the brief moment between conflicts where you prepared for the next one. And survival wasn't about running. It was about making the other side regret they ever found you. On Earth, the factories began retooling. Shipyards that built passenger liners started building warships. Civilians volunteered for military service in numbers that overwhelmed the recruitment centers. Children watched news broadcasts about the coming war and didn't hide. They listened. They learned. They understood. Scout Jiwon finally received a response to her gravitational readings. The Council Science Division had reviewed her data. They confirmed unusual activity in the region. They marked it for future investigation. By the time they got around to investigating, there would be no one left to investigate it. The Korthak swarm was coming. The Council was running. And humanity stood in the path, ready to teach the galaxy what 10,000 years of war had created. Protocol Nightfall began with a single broadcast. Every screen on Earth and every colony showed the same message. Fleet Admiral Soman stood in uniform, her expression calm but serious. She explained the situation simply. An enemy was coming. They couldn't be reasoned with. They would have to be fought. The broadcast ended with a request for volunteers. The government expected a decent response. What they got was overwhelming. Recruitment centers had lines stretching for blocks. Factory workers signed up for double shifts without being asked. Scientists contacted their old military contacts, offering to help. Retired soldiers came out of retirement. The Council species monitored these developments with confusion. Where was the panic? Where were the riots? Where were the desperate attempts to flee? Instead, Earth seemed to grow calmer, more focused, like the planet itself was taking a deep breath. Before a fight. Combat engineer Junho received his orders within a week. He was assigned to the outer colonies, the ones that couldn't be held. His job was simple and horrible. Turn peaceful settlements into death traps. Make every building a fortress. Make every street a killing ground. Use everything. He arrived at New Bizan Colony with a team of 300 engineers. The colonists watched as military transports landed and soldiers poured out. The colony administrator, an older woman named Myung, met him at the landing pad. "You're here to defend us?" She asked hopefully. Junho wished he could say yes. "We're here to buy time. The Korthaks will take this colony. Our job is to make them pay for it. I need to talk to your people about evacuation." Myung looked at the colony behind her. 200,000 people lived here. They had built homes, raised children, created lives. "How long do we have?" 3 months. Maybe 4. The evacuation was voluntary. Most people left, but thousands stayed. They helped Junho's engineers dig tunnels under the streets. They helped plant mines in the parks. They helped rig the power station to explode at the touch of a button. When Junho questioned them, they had simple answers. "This is our home," one man said. "If the bugs want it, they can have it. After we're done making it hell." Back on Earth, scientist Yunji stood in a laboratory that hadn't been used in 70 years. The Advanced Weapons Development program had been shut down after the corporate wars. Humanity had decided that some weapons were too dangerous, too cruel, too likely to destroy everything. But that was peacetime thinking. And peacetime was over. Yunji reviewed the old files with growing excitement and horror. Kinetic bombardment systems that could crack planets. Self-replicating drones that could strip a moon to build more drones. Biological agents designed to disrupt neural networks. Weapons that the Council would call war crimes. "We banned these for good reasons," her assistant said nervously. "We banned them because we might use them on each other," Yunji replied. The Korthax aren't us, and they're not playing by our rules. She pulled up a file marked Project Reaper. Let's start with this one. The shipyards worked around the clock. Admiral Soman walked through the construction bays, watching warships take shape. They weren't like Council vessels. Council ships were beautiful, efficient, designed for long service and comfortable crews. Human ships were ugly, cramped, and built for one purpose. Captain Dayan was overseeing construction of the Fifth Fleet. He looked exhausted but satisfied. We'll have 60 ships ready in 2 months. Another 40 by month 3. That's not enough, Soman said. It never is, Dayan agreed. But it's what we have. How are we supposed to fight something that destroyed Council fleets 10 times our size? Soman smiled. It was not a nice smile. We don't fight fair. We don't fight honorably. We fight like humans. Hit and run. Ambush tactics. Target the weak points. Make them chase us through minefields. Ram them if we run out of ammunition. Blow up our own ships to take out their command vessels. Dayan nodded slowly. The Council would call that barbaric. The Council is running away. We're not. Being barbaric is sometimes just being alive. Ambassador Hyan received daily messages from Velnus. Each one was more desperate than the last. The Korthax were accelerating their advance. More systems were falling. The casualties were mounting into the billions. Please, Velnus wrote, reconsider. There is no shame in survival. Your species is young and brave, but bravery without wisdom is just suicide. Hyan sent polite responses. He thanked the Archon for his concern. He assured him that humanity had considered all options. He did not mention that every simulation, every tactical analysis, every strategic model showed the same thing. The Korthax could be slowed. Maybe they could even be stopped. But it would cost everything. The first engagement happened exactly on schedule. The Korthax swarm arrived at New Bizin in overwhelming numbers. 400 bioships, each one larger than anything humanity had built. They came expecting easy prey, another colony to harvest, more resources for the swarm. Instead, they found the Fifth Fleet waiting. Captain Dayan stood on his bridge, watching the enemy approach. His hands were steady. His voice was calm. All ships remember the plan. We're not here to win. We're here to hurt them. Make them remember this day. Make them scared of the next one. The battle started badly. The Korthax had numbers, size, and experience. They had consumed hundreds of worlds. They had crushed every fleet sent against them. These small human ships should have been nothing, but human ships didn't fight like Council vessels. They didn't maintain formation. They swarmed like predators, fast and aggressive. They targeted weak points with precision. When a human ship took critical damage, it didn't retreat. It accelerated toward the nearest Korthax vessel and detonated its reactor. Captain Dayan's flagship took heavy fire 3 hours into the battle. His bridge was on fire. Half his crew was dead. The ship was falling apart around him. He looked at the tactical display and saw a Korthax command ship nearby. All power to engines, he ordered. Ram them. His first officer stared at him. Sir, we still have escape pods. I know, Dayan said. This is more important. The flagship hit the Korthax vessel at full speed. Both ships exploded. The blast took out 3 more bioships nearby. Dayan's last transmission was simple. Second Fleet, they're all yours. The battle lasted 3 days. The Korthax lost 47 capital ships. Humanity lost 63 vessels. 12,000 personnel died. By any measure, it was a disaster. The humans lost more ships, more people. The colony fell, But the Korthax learned something terrible. Humans didn't surrender. Even when their ships were crippled and burning, they kept fighting. Even when defeat was certain, they made it cost. The swarm had never encountered resistance like this. Prey was supposed to run or submit. These creatures did neither. News of the battle spread across human space. The council expected panic and mourning. Instead, recruitment doubled. Factory production increased. Scientists worked faster on new weapons. The human response to losing was to try harder. Xenopsychologist Hannah watched the reports from her office on Confederation Prime. She was Thraxi, trained in understanding alien psychology. She had studied humanity for months, trying to understand them. This battle should have broken their spirit. Instead, it seemed to strengthen their resolve. She wrote a report that would change everything the Council believed about humans. We assumed their history reflected fear. We were wrong. Human history reflects adaptation. They learn to not just survive war, but excel at it. They don't fear death because their culture romanticizes sacrifice. They believe dying for a cause is noble. They actually compete for the honor of dangerous assignments. The report concluded with a warning. The Council should stop viewing humanity as a frightened species seeking protection. They are predators who learn to hunt together. The Korthax may have awakened something the galaxy hasn't seen in 3,000 years. A species that views war not as a last resort, but as a solvable problem. The report went viral across Council networks. Some species found it reassuring. Others found it terrifying. A few brave souls asked the obvious question. If humans are this effective at war, what happens when they have no enemies left? Colonel Jinsu led the Ghost Brigade on their first deep raid. 2 weeks after New Bizen, his team consisted of 50 Special Forces soldiers in stealth ships. Their mission was simple. Get behind Korthax lines. Cause chaos. Make them afraid of the dark. They sabotaged Hive ships while they were in transit. They assassinated Queen nodes with precision strikes. They hacked Korthax communication systems and filled them with false data. The hive mind began experiencing something it had never known: uncertainty. Its warriors received conflicting orders. Its ships went to coordinates where no enemies existed. Its queens started doubting their own perceptions. "We're fighting a hive mind," Jinsu explained to his team before a mission. "So we attack the mind. Make it confused. Make it paranoid. Make it waste resources chasing ghosts." The Korthax advance slowed, not because they lacked numbers or firepower. They slowed because they were learning caution. Every human colony was a nightmare. Every battle was costly. Every advance meant losses. The swarm had never experienced effective resistance before. It didn't know how to adapt. On Earth, children watched news broadcasts of the war. They saw the casualties. They saw the losses. The Council species assumed this would traumatize them. Instead, the children listened carefully. They learned the names of heroes. They memorized the battles. They understood that some things were worth fighting for. A teacher in London explained it to her students. Captain Dayon could have escaped. He chose to stay and hurt the enemy instead. That's called sacrifice. Remember his name. Remember why he did it. One day, you might have to make the same choice. The Council found this educational approach disturbing. They were teaching children about war, about death, about sacrifice. What kind of species does that? A species that understands war never really ends, humanity thought. A species that knows peace is temporary and must be defended. A species that learned these lessons through 10,000 years of hard experience. The war had been raging for 8 months. The Korthax swarm controlled 40 human colonies now, but their advance had slowed to a crawl. Every system they took cost them ships, time, and resources. The hive mind was learning a bitter lesson. Humans turned every piece of territory into a weapon. On Confederation Prime, the Council met in emergency session. Archon Velnus looked older than his years. The Korthax had finished with human space and were now turning toward the core systems, toward the Council homeworlds. The species that had maintained peace for 3,000 years were about to learn what war really meant. "We must consolidate our defenses," Velnus announced. "I propose we abandon the outer 3 spiral arms entirely. Pull all resources back to the core systems. We can fortify there and hold." The chamber erupted in argument. Representatives from 12 species shouted over each other. The translators struggled to keep up. Finally, a Veltronian elder silenced the room with a sharp gesture. "How many beings live in those spiral arms?" she asked quietly. Velnus checked his datapad. 8 trillion. Give or take. And we're just going to leave them? "We don't have the forces to defend everywhere," Velnus said tiredly. "Better to save some than lose all." Ambassador Hyan sat in the observers section, listening. When the vote was called, he stood. "The human delegation wishes to speak." Velnus looked surprised. "Ambassador, you have observer status. You don't get a vote on council matters." "I'm not asking for a vote," Hyan said calmly. "I'm informing you of humanity's position. We vote no on this retreat." "You can't vote no. You're not a voting member." "Then consider it a statement of intent," Hyan replied. He walked to the center of the chamber, where everyone could see him. "The Korthax will not reach the core systems. They will die in human space. Every ship, every warrior, every queen. We will stop them." The chamber fell silent. Finally, Velnus spoke. "Ambassador, your courage is admirable, but your tactics are suicidal. You've lost 63 ships in a single battle. You've abandoned 40 colonies. You cannot hold against the full weight of the swarm." "We're not trying to hold," Hyan said. "We're trying to kill them all." "There's a difference. The mathematics don't support victory," a council military analyst said. "Our simulations show the Korthax reaching Earth within 6 months. They'll consume your homeworld within a year." Hyan smiled. It was a cold expression that made several council members uncomfortable. "Your simulations assume we'll fight like you do. We won't. Humans don't surrender when casualties reach a certain number. We don't retreat when the odds look bad. We've been killing each other for 10,000 years. The Korthax are just another enemy." "This is madness," someone whispered. "No," Hyan said. "This is humanity. The council can retreat if you want. We understand. But we're going to stand and fight. And when we win, remember that we tried to teach you. The galaxy isn't safe. It never was. And running just means you die tired." The council voted to retreat. Humanity stood alone. But in the days that followed, strange things happened. A squadron of Thraxi cruisers defected to human lines. Their commander, Jellin, sent a simple message: "We refuse to abandon our colonies. We want to fight." Admiral Selman met with Jellin personally. "You understand that we might lose? That you might die?" Jellin's 4 eyes focused on her with unexpected intensity. "I watched my people debate while the Korthax consumed our worlds. I watched us choose survival over honor. I'm tired of running. Teach me how humans fight." More came after Jellin. Young warriors from a dozen council species arrived at human recruitment centers. They were tired of retreating, tired of being told that peace meant surrender. They wanted to learn from the species that refused to run. Commander Minho organized the volunteers into mixed units. It was chaotic at first. The council species had never experienced real military discipline. They questioned orders. They wanted explanations for everything. They had no concept of acceptable losses, but they learned. And in learning, they began to change. The true test came at Gangwa system. It was a fortress world, heavily defended and strategically critical. If the Korthax took Gangwa, the path to Earth was open. Every strategic model predicted human defeat. The Korthax were massing their forces for a decisive push. 20,000 bioships against 5,000 human vessels. Admiral Soman stood on her flagship, reviewing the battle plan one last time. Every ship from the 1st through 7th fleets was here. Every orbital defense platform was armed and ready. Ground forces under General Taijin held the planet's surface. And in a secret facility, deep underground, scientist Yunji prepared to activate Project Reaper. Captain Seojin commanded the vanguard. Her destroyer group would be the first to engage. She addressed her crew over the ship-wide comm. You all volunteered for this. You all know what we're facing. In a few hours, the biggest enemy fleet in galactic history is going to try to kill us. Our job is simple. Make them regret it. The crew responded with a roar of approval. No fear, no hesitation. Just determination. The battle began at dawn. The Korthax swarm dropped out of faster-than-light travel in perfect formation. 20,000 bioships, each one massive and terrifying. They moved with precision, guided by the hive mind. They had destroyed Council fleets 10 times this size. These humans should be nothing. The first exchange of fire lit up the system. Human ships opened up with everything they had. Missiles streaked through space. Particle beams lanced out. Nuclear warheads detonated in brilliant flashes. The Korthax returned fire, their biological weapons tearing through human shields. Ships died on both sides. The void filled with debris and radiation. But the humans kept coming. They swarmed around the larger Korthax vessels like predators taking down prey. They targeted weak points. They coordinated their attacks with brutal efficiency. Captain Seojin led her destroyer group straight into the heart of the enemy formation. They were outnumbered 50-1. It didn't matter. She targeted a Korthax command ship and poured fire into its propulsion systems. When her weapons ran dry, she rammed it at full speed. For humanity, she transmitted, then her ship exploded. The Korthax command ship died with her, and 3 nearby bioships lost coordination and crashed into each other. Pilot Nari flew her fighter through hell. She dodged between bioships, using their size against them. She targeted the organic connection points between ship sections, where the Korthax armor was weakest. When a massive carrier loomed ahead, she didn't turn away. She accelerated, flew straight into its launch bay, and fired every weapon she had into the internal structure. The carrier's fusion reactor went critical. Nari's last thought was satisfaction. 1 fighter for 1 capital ship. Good trade. On Gangwa Prime, General Taijin watched the battle through orbital feeds while fighting his own war. Korthax shock troops had landed and were pushing toward the orbital elevator. His forces held every meter with desperate determination. When one position fell, they fell back to the next prepared defense. Every street was a kill zone. Every building was trapped. The battle raged for 14 hours. Human casualties mounted into the tens of thousands. Ships died in flames. Stations fell. But the Korthax were bleeding too. They had never faced resistance like this. Never encountered an enemy that welcomed death if it meant taking the enemy with them. Then scientist Yunji activated Project Reaper. Deep beneath Gangwa Prime, a massive transmitter powered up. It broadcast a signal across the entire system, a frequency designed to disrupt the quantum entanglement that the Korthax used for their hive mind. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. For the first time in their species' history, individual Korthax warriors found themselves alone. cut off from the hive mind. Suddenly, they weren't part of a greater whole. They were individuals facing death. And they panicked. Ships collided as coordination collapsed. Attack formations broke apart. Warriors fled in random directions. The hive mind, which had been their greatest strength, shattered into a million confused voices. Admiral Salmon saw the chaos on her tactical display and didn't hesitate. All ships full offensive. Show no mercy. End them. The human forces tore through the disoriented cortex like sharks through wounded prey. Ships that had been barely holding on suddenly found themselves winning. Defensive positions that were about to fall turned into slaughterhouses. The battle that was supposed to last days ended in hours. When it was over, 20,000 Corthax bioships had become debris. The swarm that had consumed 7 systems was destroyed at Gangwa. Human casualties were severe. 60,000 dead, 150 ships lost. But they had won. The silence after the battle was eerie. Surviving crew members sat at their stations, too exhausted to celebrate. General Taijin walked through the ruins of his defensive positions, looking at the cost. Captain Seojin and Pilot Nari would never come home. Thousands of others wouldn't either, but the line had held. News of the victory spread across the galaxy at the speed of light. The council species watched the recordings in stunned silence. The humans had done the impossible. They had defeated an enemy that destroyed everything in its path. They had stood when everyone else ran. They had won when victory was mathematically impossible. Archon Velnus sat in his chambers, watching the battle footage for the 10th time. He saw human ships ramming enemies when their weapons failed. He saw soldiers fighting with broken bodies. He saw a species that treated death as a tool, something to be used if the situation required it. What have we become? He wondered aloud. We built a civilization of peace by hiding from reality. And when reality came for us, these young, terrified humans stepped forward and said no. He drafted a message to the council. It was time to face an uncomfortable truth. The galaxy belonged to species that were willing to fight for it. 3 weeks after Gangwa, the galaxy was still trying to process what had happened. Humanity had won the greatest military victory in recorded history. They had destroyed an enemy fleet that outnumbered them 4-1. They had broken the Corthax, swarm that had consumed 7 star systems. But the cost haunted every human who survived. Engineer Junho stood in the ruins of New Bizan Colony. He had helped turn this place into a fortress. He had planted the mines, rigged the buildings, designed the traps. Now he walked through empty streets where families once lived. The colony had bought humanity 3 days during the war. 3 days for other forces to regroup. 3 days that cost 200,000 lives. An old woman approached him. Her name was Myung, the colony administrator who had stayed behind. Somehow she had survived the battle. She looked thin and tired, but her eyes were clear. You came back, she said. I had to see it, Junho replied. I helped destroy this place. You helped defend it, Myung corrected. We knew what would happen. We chose to stay. We chose to fight. She gestured to a wall nearby. Someone had painted names on it. Thousands of names. The soldiers who died here. We're making sure everyone remembers them. Junho looked at the memorial wall and felt something break inside him. All those names. All those people. Gone because the galaxy had something in it that couldn't be reasoned with. Was it worth it? He asked quietly. Myung thought about it. My grandson is alive. He evacuated with the children. He's going to grow up because soldiers stood here and died. Yes, it was worth it. On Confederation Prime, xenopsychologist Hana published her second major report on humanity. This one was titled, The Cost They're Willing to Pay. It analyzed human casualty rates, memorial culture, and the psychology of sacrifice. Humans don't just accept death in war, she wrote. They honor it. They build monuments to it. They teach their children the names of those who died. This serves two purposes. First, it ensures the sacrifice is remembered and valued. Second, it prepares the next generation to make the same choice if necessary. The report disturbed many council members. They saw it as indoctrination, teaching children to accept violence. But others understood it differently. Humans weren't teaching children to love war. They were teaching them that some things matter more than individual survival. The debate split council species into factions. Some began reviewing their own military capabilities, realizing how vulnerable they had become. Others doubled down on their commitment to peace, viewing humanity as dangerous precisely because they were so effective at war. Ambassador Hyan addressed the council 1 month after Gangwa. The chamber was packed. Every species wanted to hear what humanity would say now that the immediate threat was over. The Korthax are broken, but not destroyed, Hyan began. Our intelligence suggests remnant forces have retreated to the outer veil. They're scattered, disorganized, no longer a threat to major systems. The council can return to your colonies now. The danger has passed. Archon Velnus looked relieved. Then humanity has our gratitude. Your sacrifice will be remembered. I'm not finished, Hyan said. His voice was cold. The danger has passed for now, but there will be other threats. Other species that don't understand council protocols. Other enemies that can't be negotiated with. What will you do then? The chamber fell silent. Finally, a Veltronian representative spoke. We will rebuild our military forces. We will be better prepared. Will you? Hyan asked. Or will you build token forces that make you feel safe? Will you actually learn to fight, or just pretend to know how? He paused. Humanity lost 4 million military personnel in this war. 900,000 civilians. That's catastrophic by our standards. But you know what the council told us? That we should have lost 10 times that many. That our victory was mathematically impossible. What's your point? Velnus asked. My point is that we won because we understand war, Hyan said. We understand that soldiers die, that civilians die, that sometimes you have to sacrifice everything to protect what matters. You spent 3,000 years forgetting these lessons. The Korthax reminded you, but memories fade. In 100 years, will you remember? Or will you go back to believing that peace is natural and war is an aberration? A young Thraxi officer stood up. It was Jelen, the commander who had defected to human forces during the war. I remember. My people called me traitor for joining humanity. They said I abandoned our values. But I watched the Korthax consume our colonies while we debated resolutions. I fought at Gangwa. I saw humans die protecting species that weren't even their own. That's not barbarism. That's honor. More voices joined Jelen's. Young warriors from council species who had fought alongside humans. They spoke of what they learned, how human forces operated, how they prepared for every scenario, how they accepted casualties as inevitable rather than catastrophic. The old guard found it disturbing. The younger generation found it inspiring. Admiral Somin retired from active military service after Gangwa. She had seen enough war for one lifetime. But the council offered her a new position, Confederation Military Advisor. Her job was to help council species rebuild their militaries properly. Her first student was Commander Jelen. They sat in a strategy room reviewing battle simulations. Somin paused the display at a critical moment. There, she said. Your formation breaks when you take casualties. Why? Because we lose combat effectiveness, Jelen replied. No, Somin said patiently. You lose effectiveness because you panic when people die. Death in combat is normal. Expected. You need to maintain formation and continue the mission. The moment you break formation, you lose. Jelen thought about this. My people aren't used to accepting casualties. We spent 3,000 years avoiding war. Then you need to get used to it, Soman said bluntly. I'm not saying you should throw lives away. I'm saying you need to understand that soldiers die in war. That's what they sign up for. Honor their sacrifice by winning, not by falling apart when it happens. The training was brutal. Council officers learned tactics that their species found uncomfortable. Acceptable loss ratios. Tactical retreats. Using terrain as a weapon. Fighting dirty when necessary. Many quit. But those who stayed learned to think like human soldiers. Back on Earth, the rebuilding continued. Families mourned their dead. Veterans struggled with what they had seen. The government established counseling centers and memorial programs. But there was no attempt to hide the cost or pretend the war was clean. Captain Dayan's daughter, a young woman named Sunny, spoke at a memorial service. My father died ramming a Corthax ship. He could have escaped. He chose to stay. People keep telling me they're sorry for my loss. I'm not. He died doing exactly what he believed in. Protecting others. That's not a tragedy. That's heroism. The speech was broadcast across human space. It crystallized something that humanity had always believed, but rarely said out loud. Death in service wasn't something to apologize for. It was something to honor. Colonel Jinsu continued his deep raids against Corthax remnants. The Ghost Brigade hunted down scattered hive ships, ensuring they couldn't regroup. But Jinsu was troubled by what he found. The Corthax weren't just scattered. They were changed. They're avoiding us, he reported to Admiral Soman. They run when we show up. The hive mind is still fractured from Project Reaper, but they're learning new behaviors. Fear, caution. They never had these before. Is that a problem? Soman asked. I don't know, Jinsu admitted. We broke something fundamental in their species. The hive mind that made them strong also made them fearless. Now they're individuals experiencing fear for the first time. They're dangerous in new ways. Scientist Yunji studied the data from Project Reaper with mixed feelings. The weapon had won the war. It had saved billions of lives. But it had also fundamentally changed another species. She wondered if they had the right to do that, even to save themselves. Her assistant found her staring at scans of Corthax neural patterns. Having regrets? Having questions, Yunji corrected. We turned them into individuals. They were terrifying as a hive mind, but at least they had purpose, unity. Now they're just scared creatures trying to survive. Did we save the galaxy, or did we commit genocide against their culture? Does it matter? Her assistant asked. They were going to kill everyone. It matters to me, Yunji said softly. The philosophical debate spread through human space. Some argued that any action was justified in self-defense. Others questioned whether winning through cultural destruction was really winning at all. The council species watched these debates with fascination. Humans had won the war, but were now arguing about whether they should have. Veltronian philosopher published a paper comparing human self-reflection to council species attitudes. Humans fight with ferocity, but they question their actions afterward. They honor their warriors, but debate their methods. They accept violence as necessary, but never forget its cost. This is the paradox that the Council never understood. Humans don't love war. They're just willing to do it when necessary, and they carry the weight of that choice forever. Ambassador Hyan met privately with Archon Velnus one evening. The old Thraxi looked tired and sad. I misjudged your species, Velnus said. I thought your history meant you were afraid. I was wrong. You understand fear better than any species I've met. You just don't let it stop you. Fear is useful, Hyan replied. It keeps you alert, prepared. It's only dangerous when it paralyzes you. My species is paralyzed, Velnus admitted. We've spent so long avoiding conflict that we forgot how to face it. And when conflict came, we ran. Your species stood firm. Now my people are divided. Half want to be like you. Half are terrified of becoming like you. We're not asking you to be like us, Hyan said gently. We're asking you to be strong in your own way. Find your courage. Build your defenses. Stand for something. And if we can't, Hyan met the Archon's 4 eyes with his 2. Then the galaxy will pass you by. And the next threat that comes won't be stopped by species that run. 2 years passed. The galaxy looked different now. The Council still existed, but its power had shifted. Member species maintained active militaries for the first time in 3,000 years. Young officers trained in academies where human instructors taught lessons learned from 10,000 years of warfare. The era of ritualized conflict was dead. Real war had returned to the galaxy. Admiral Soman walked through the Confederation Defense Academy on Luna. She was older now, her hair showing more gray, but her eyes were still sharp. She watched Council officers drilling with human sergeants. They were learning to fight in ways their ancestors would have found barbaric. A Veltronian cadet approached her after training. His crystalline body was covered in training dust. Admiral, may I ask a question? Go ahead. Do humans ever regret being so good at war? Do you wish you were more like us? Peaceful by nature? Soman thought carefully about her answer. Every day, she said honestly. We wish we didn't have to be warriors. We wish the galaxy was safe enough that we could focus on art, science, exploration. But wishing doesn't change reality. The galaxy has threats in it. Species that don't negotiate. Forces that don't care about peace. Someone has to stand against them. So you regret the necessity, not the capability, the cadet said. Exactly. Being good at war isn't something to be proud of. But being willing to defend others when no one else will, that matters. The Korthax remnants had scattered to the deepest parts of the outer veil. Colonel Jinsu's Ghost Brigade tracked them carefully. The hive mind was still fractured. Individual Korthax groups learned to survive on their own, developing behaviors their species had never known. Caution, fear, even something like individuality. Some human scientists argued for leaving them alone. Let them evolve into something new. Maybe they could change. Others, including General Tajin, wanted complete elimination. The debate continued without resolution, but the Korthax themselves seemed to have made a choice. They avoided Council space entirely. They avoided human territory even more carefully. Scouting reports suggested they were transmitting warnings to each other. Stay away from the small ones. The ones that don't fear death. The ones that fight like the universe itself is their enemy. Humanity had become the monster that other monsters feared. Ambassador Hyan received a formal invitation to address the Confederation Grand Assembly. The Council was voting on human membership status. After 2 years of debate, argument, and political maneuvering, the decision was finally here. Archon Velnus opened the session. He looked older, more tired. The war had aged him. Today, we vote on full Council membership for humanity. This is not just about adding another species. This is about acknowledging that our understanding of peace was incomplete, that our vision of civilization was naive, that we needed warriors, and humanity answered the call. A Veltronian elder stood to speak against membership. Humanity is dangerous. They teach their children about war. They honor violence. They build monuments to death. If we accept them fully, we accept their philosophy. We become like them. Jelen stood up. The young Thraxi commander had become a voice for the new generation. With respect, Elder, we're already becoming like them. And that's good. For 3,000 years, we hid from reality. We built a civilization of peace because we were lucky. The Korthax reminded us that luck runs out. Humanity taught us that preparation matters. They taught you violence, the Elder said. They taught me responsibility, Jelen corrected. They taught me that peace isn't natural. It's something you defend, something you work for, something that requires sacrifice. My people died while we debated. Human people died while they fought. I know which philosophy I respect more. The debate lasted for hours. Finally, Velnus called for a vote. The chamber fell silent as the tallies came in. When the final count appeared, Velnus looked at Hyan with something like relief. The vote passes. Humanity is granted full council membership. No conditions. No restrictions. Welcome. On Earth, the news was met with quiet satisfaction. There were celebrations in some cities, but the mood was more thoughtful than jubilant. Humanity had proven itself through blood and sacrifice. The recognition felt less like victory and more like acknowledgement of cost. General Taijin addressed the United Earth Defense Committee the day after the vote. We're full council members now. That means we have responsibilities. The council species are learning to fight. Our job is to make sure they learn properly. Strength without wisdom becomes tyranny. We know this better than anyone. You're saying we need to teach them restraint? A colonel asked. I'm saying we need to teach them everything, Taijin replied. How to fight. When to fight. How to know when you've gone too far. We spent 10,000 years learning these lessons by making every mistake possible. Maybe we can help them skip some of the worst ones. The Confederation Defense Academy expanded. More council species sent their young warriors to learn from humans. Pilot Nari, now a wing commander, oversaw flight training. She watched her students with mixed feelings. They were eager and brave, but they lacked the edge that came from real danger. During a training exercise, a Thraxi pilot made a reckless maneuver that would have gotten him killed in real combat. Nari stopped the simulation and called him to her office. You flew into crossfire to save a wingman, she said. Why? It's what human pilots do, the Thraxi replied. Sacrifice for the team. Human pilots calculate the risk first, Nari corrected. We sacrifice when it matters. When saving one person is worth more than losing one person. You just flew into death for no strategic gain. That's not bravery. That's waste. The pilot looked confused. But the stories say humans always help their wingmen. The stories don't mention the times we don't, Nari said. Because those decisions are harder. Sometimes the right call is to let someone die so the mission succeeds. That's what leadership means. Making choices that hurt. She saw understanding dawn in the pilot's eyes. He was learning that being like humans wasn't about dramatic sacrifices. It was about cold calculations and carrying the weight of those calculations forever. Engineer, Junho returned to New Bizen for the memorial dedication. The colony had been rebuilt. 200,000 people lived here again, building new lives on ground soaked with blood. The memorial wall had grown. Every name of every person who died was recorded. Soldier and civilian alike. Miang stood beside him at the ceremony. She was older now, thinner. The war had taken its toll. They wanted to rename the colony, she told Junho. Call it something like Victory City or Liberation Point. I said no. It stays New Bizan. We don't hide from what happened here. The memorial was simple. A black wall with names carved in precise letters. 4 million military names. 900,000 civilian names. Every single person who died holding the line against the Korthax. A young girl approached Junho after the ceremony. She couldn't have been more than 10 years old. "My dad's name is on the wall," she said. "He was a soldier. He died at Gangwa." "I'm sorry," John-Ho said automatically. "Don't be," the girl replied. "Mom says he died protecting people. She says we honor him by remembering why he fought, by being worth what he gave up." Junho looked at this child, already learning the lessons that shaped humanity. The cost of peace, the value of sacrifice, the weight of memory. "Your mother is right. What's your name?" "Hana," the girl said. Then she smiled. "Named after the alien lady who wrote about us. Mon says she helped the galaxy understand humans." Zenip psychologist Hana had indeed become famous. Her papers on human psychology were required reading in every council academy. She had retired from active research to teach at the Confederation University. Her students came from 40 different species, all trying to understand the species that changed everything. One day, a human student asked her a question that stopped the class. "Do you think humanity is good for the galaxy?" Hannah considered it carefully. "I think humanity is necessary for the galaxy." "Good? That's harder to answer. You're capable of terrible things, but you're also capable of incredible sacrifice. You fight with ferocity, but you question your methods. You honor your warriors, but mourn your enemies. You're complicated, dangerous, and exactly what the galaxy needed when the Korthax came." "What about now?" the student pressed. "Now that the threat is over?" "The threat is never over," Hana replied. "That's what humanity understands and what the Council forgot. The universe doesn't care about our philosophies. It doesn't reward peace or punish violence. It just is. And in that reality, species like yours have value. Not because you love war, but because you're willing to do it when necessary." Scientist Yunji continued her research on early warning systems. Project Reaper remained locked away, available but hopefully unnecessary. She worked with council scientists to develop detection methods for hive mind species. If another Korthax-like threat emerged, the galaxy would have warning. Her assistant asked her once if she regretted creating the weapon. Yunji thought about the question for a long time. "I regret the necessity," she finally said. "I regret that the galaxy required something so brutal. But I don't regret doing it. 4 million humans died winning that war. Billions of council citizens were saved. If I had to make the choice again, I would. And I would carry the weight of it again." That was humanity in a sentence. Do what's necessary. Carry the weight. Never forget the cost. 5 years after Gangyo, the Council held a joint military exercise. Human forces, Thraxi cruisers, Veltronian fighters, and squadrons from 6 other species worked together. They practiced coordination, communication, combined tactics. It was messy at first. Different species had different approaches. But slowly, they learned to work together. Admiral Jang commanded the exercise from his flagship. He was younger than Somin, part of the new generation that grew up during the war. He watched the mixed fleet maneuver and felt something like hope. The galaxy was learning. Slowly, painfully, but learning. "Think they'll be ready for the next crisis?" his executive officer asked. "No," Jae Young said honestly. "But they'll be better than they were. And that's all we can ask for." Ambassador Hyan gave his final address to the Council before retirement. He stood in the same chamber where he had first met the Council, where Velnus had called humans fearful. The chamber was different now. More military officers in the audience. More young faces. More species willing to stand rather than run. "When I first came here, the Council thought humans feared war," Hyan began. "You saw our history and thought we must be terrified to fight so much. You were wrong. We understand fear. We respect it. But we never let it control us." He paused, looking at the assembled representatives. The galaxy is changing. You're learning to defend yourselves. You're building militaries, training warriors, accepting that peace requires strength. Some of you resent this. Some of you think humanity corrupted the Council's peaceful nature. But here's what you need to understand. We didn't corrupt anything. We just reminded you of reality. The Korthax would have come whether humans existed or not. The galaxy has threats in it. Always has. Always will. You spent 3,000 years pretending otherwise. We spent 10,000 years learning to deal with it. So no, humans don't fear war. We fear forgetting how to fight. We fear becoming soft when the galaxy is hard. We fear failing the people who depend on us. But war itself? He smiled. War is just another problem. And humanity has always been good at solving problems. The speech ended to silence. Then slowly applause. Not from everyone. Some species still found humanity disturbing. But enough. Enough to matter. The galaxy spun on. Threats emerged and were dealt with. Pirates raided and were hunted down. Territorial disputes flared and were resolved, sometimes through force. The Council maintained its ideals of peace, but now backed them with military strength. The era of naive pacifism was over, and humanity watched the stars, vigilant as always. They trained Council warriors. They patrolled the frontiers. They built their memorials and remembered their dead. 4 million names on walls across human space. 900,000 more. Every single one recorded. Every sacrifice honored in schools across Earth and the colonies. Children learned about Ganghwa. About Captain Dayan, who rammed his ship into the enemy. About Pilot Nari, who flew into a carrier reactor. About the 200,000 colonists of New Bizan who stayed and fought. The names became legend. The sacrifices became lessons. And in the deepest parts of the outer veil, scattered Korthax survivors transmitted warnings to each other. Stay away from human space. Stay away from the species that treats death as a tool. Stay away from the warriors who refuse to run. The line held. Humanity remained vigilant. The stars burned cold and distant, full of threats and wonders in equal measure. And when the next crisis came, as it inevitably would, the galaxy would face it together. Led by a species that never forgot how to fight, because they never forgot what they were fighting for. They said humans feared war. Humanity proved them dead wrong.